coat and skirt, black blouse, and hat with a crape rose. Grandma nodded. "It was God's will," said she. The stewardess shut her lips and, taking a deep breath, she seemed to expand. "What I always say is," she said, as though it was her own discovery, "sooner or later each of us has to go, and that's a certainty." She paused. "Now, can I bring you anything, Mrs. Crane? A cup of tea? I know it's no good offering you a little something to keep the cold out." Grandma shook her head. "Nothing, thank you. We've got a few wine biscuits, and Fenella has a very nice banana." "Then I'll give you a look later on," said the stewardess, and she went out, shutting the door. What a very small cabin it was! It was like being shut up in a box with Grandma. The dark round eye above the washstand gleamed at them dully. Fenella felt shy. She stood against the door, still clasping her luggage and the umbrella. Were they going to get undressed in here? Already her grandma had taken off her bonnet, and, rolling up the strings, she fixed each with a pin to the lining before she hung the bonnet up. Her white hair shone like silk. The little bun at the back was covered with a black net. Fenella hardly ever saw her grandma with her head uncovered. She looked strange. "I shall put on the woolen fascinator your dear mother crocheted for me," said Grandma, and, unstrapping the sausage, she took it out and wound it round her head. The fringe of grey bobbles danced at her eyebrows as she smiled tenderly and mournfully at Fenella. Then she undid her bodice, and something under that, and something else under that. Then there seemed a short, sharp tussle, and Grandma flushed faintly. Snip! Snap! She had undone her stays. She breathed a sigh of relief, and sitting on the plush couch, she slowly and carefully pulled off her elastic-sided boots and stood them side by side. By the time Fenella had taken off her coat and skirt and put on her flannel dressing gown, Grandma was quite ready. "Must I take off my boots, Grandma? They're lace." Grandma gave them a moment's deep consideration. "You'd feel a great deal more comfortable if you did, child," said she. She kissed Fenella. "Don't forget to say your prayers. Our dear Lord is with us when we are at sea, even more than when we are on dry land." "And because I am an experienced traveller," said Grandma briskly, "I shall take the upper berth." "But, Grandma, however will you get up there?" 3 little spider-like steps were all Fenella saw. The old woman gave a small, silent laugh before she mounted them nimbly, and she peered over the high bunk at the astonished Fenella. "You didn't think your grandma could do that, did you?" said she. And as she sank back Fenella heard her light laugh again. The hard square of brown soap would not lather, and the water in the bottle was like a kind of blue jelly. How hard it was, too, to turn down those stiff sheets. You simply had to tear your way in. If everything had been different, Fenella might have got the giggles. At last she was inside, and while she lay there panting, there sounded from above a long, soft whispering, as though someone was gently, gently rustling among tissue paper to find something. It was Grandma saying her prayers. A long time passed. Then the stewardess came in. She trod softly and leaned her hand on Grandma's bunk. "We're just entering the Straits," she said. "Oh, it's a fine night, but we're rather empty. We may pitch a little." And indeed at that moment the Picton boat rose and hung in the air just long enough to give a shiver before she swung down again. And there was the sound of heavy water slapping against her sides. Fenella remembered she had left the swan-necked umbrella standing up on the little couch. If it fell over, would it break? But Grandma remembered too, at the same time. "I wonder if you'd mind, stewardess, laying down my umbrella," she whispered. "Not at all, Mrs. Crane." And the stewardess, coming back to Grandma, breathed, Your little granddaughter's in such a beautiful sleep." "God be praised for that," said Grandma. "Poor little motherless mite," said the stewardess, and Grandma was still telling the stewardess all about what happened when Fenella fell asleep. But she hadn't been asleep long enough to dream before she woke up again to see something waving in the air above her head. What was it? What could it be? It was a small grey foot. Now another joined it. They seemed to be feeling about for something. There came a sigh. "I'm awake, Grandma," said Fenella. "Oh, dear, am I near the ladder?" asked Grandma. "I thought it was this end." "No, Grandma, it's the other. I'll put your foot on it." "Are we there?" asked Fenella. "In the harbour," said Grandma. "We must get up, child. You'd better have a biscuit to steady yourself before you move." But Fenella had hopped out of her bunk. The lamp was still burning, but night was over, and it was cold. Peering through that round eye she could see far off some rocks. Now they were scattered over with foam. Now a gull flipped by, and now there came a long piece of real land. "It's land, Grandma," said Fenella, wonderingly, as though they had been at sea for weeks together. She hugged herself. She stood on one leg and rubbed it with the toes of the other foot. She was trembling. Oh, it had all been so sad lately. Was it going to change? But all her grandma said was, "Make haste, child. I should leave your nice banana for the stewardess as you haven't eaten it." And Fenella put on her black clothes again, and a button sprang off one of her gloves and rolled to where she couldn't reach it. They went up on deck. But if it had been cold in the cabin, on deck it was like ice. The sun was not up yet, but the stars were dim, and the cold pale sky was the same colour as the cold pale sea. On the land a white mist rose and fell. Now they could see quite plainly dark bush. Even the shapes of the umbrella ferns showed, and those strange silvery withered trees that are like skeletons. Now they could see the landing stage and some little houses, pale too, clustered together, like shells on the lid of a box. The other passengers tramped up and down, but more slowly than they had the night before, and they looked gloomy. And now the landing stage came out to meet them. Slowly it swam towards the Picton boat, and a man holding a coil of rope, and a cart with a small drooping horse and another man sitting on the step, came too. "It's Mr. Penreddy, Fenella, come for us," said Grandma. She sounded pleased. Her white waxen cheeks were blue with cold, her chin trembled, and she had to keep wiping her eyes and her little pink nose. "You've got my—" "Yes, Grandma." Fenella showed it to her. The rope came flying through the air, and smack, it fell onto the deck. The gangway was lowered. Again Fenella followed her grandma onto the wharf, over to the little cart, and a moment later they were bowling away. The hoofs of the little horse drummed over the wooden piles, then sank softly into the sandy road. Not a soul was to be seen. There was not even a feather of smoke. The mist rose and fell, and the sea still sounded asleep as slowly it turned on the beach. "I seen Mr. Crane yesterday," said Mr. Penreddy. "He looked himself then. Missus knocked him up a batch of scones last week." And now the little horse pulled up before one of the shell-like houses. They got down. Fenella put her hand on the gate, and the big, trembling dewdrops soaked through her glove tips. Up a little path of round white pebbles they went, with drenched, sleeping flowers on either side. Grandma's delicate white picotees were so heavy with dew that they were fallen, but their sweet smell was part of the cold morning. The blinds were down in the little house. They mounted the steps onto the veranda. A pair of old bluchers was on one side of the door, and a large red watering can on the other. "Tut, tut, your grandpa," said Grandma. She turned the handle. Not a sound. She called.